30 seconds. Literally, just 30 seconds. That is all it took. Imagine being in the cockpit of one of the world's most advanced commercial aircraft, pushing the throttles forward for what should be a completely routine international flight, only to be faced with a catastrophic, unrecoverable emergency just moments after the wheels leave the runway. 30 seconds offers almost zero time to troubleshoot, communicate, or recover. Actually, scratch that. It is essentially zero time. Now, that terrifying scenario actually became a reality on June 12, 2025. Air India flight AI171, a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner bound for London Gatwick, crashed shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad. Carrying 242 people on board, this tragedy instantly became the deadliest aviation accident in Indian history. It completely shattered the previously strong safety record of the 787 Dreamliner family and sent massive shockwaves through the entire global aviation industry. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really focused, totally objective look at the comprehensive research and the preliminary findings surrounding the AI171 tragedy. We're going to bypass all the sensationalism and look strictly at the hard data, the timelines, and the official investigative documents to understand exactly what is known, what's still a total mystery, and how the world responded. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The fall of AI171. 2. Investigating the wreckage. 3. 4 leading crash theories. 4. Global regulatory response. And 5. Impact on aviation safety. Let's get started. Section 1. The fall of AI171. So let's look at the exact chronological sequence of events on that fateful day in June. At approximately 0809 UTC, Flight AI171 began its takeoff roll. The aircraft gets airborne, but within a mere 30 seconds, it crashes right in the vicinity of the airport. Statistically speaking, the takeoff and initial climb are absolutely the most critical phases of flight, mostly because a crew has zero altitude to trade for airspeed and no time to correct a major failure. And indeed, this catastrophic event presented itself so incredibly fast that recovery was just impossible. By the end of that exact same day, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or AAIB, had already initiated its investigation. In the immediate aftermath of an event like this, there is always this massive fog of war when it comes to the flow of information. While sources consistently report 241 or 242 onboard fatalities, the estimates for casualties on the ground varied wildly in those initial reports. We're talking anywhere from a low of 5 to a high of 53, with a wildly common report eventually settling around 33. This really reminds us just how difficult it is to verify data right in the wake of a massive disaster, and exactly why methodical, scientific investigations are so crucial. Section 2. Investigating the wreckage. An accident of this massive scale requires a monumental multinational response governed by the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. India's AIB is naturally leading the charge because the accident happened on their soil. But they definitely aren't doing it alone. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board and the FAA are heavily involved because the aircraft was designed and manufactured in the United States. The UK Civil Aviation Authority jumped in because London was the destination. You've also got European regulators at EASA, India's own DGCA, and of course, crucial technical support directly from Boeing and GE Aerospace, who manufacture the engines. So it's essentially a massive web of the absolute top aviation experts in the world. Section 3. 4 leading crash theories. With the preliminary report released on July 12, 2025, investigators started homing in on potential causes. And the central question driving this entire international effort is simply this: what brought down a modern Dreamliner? The Boeing 787 is incredibly advanced. It relies heavily on composite materials, fly-by-wire technology, which basically means electronic interfaces replace those old-school manual flight controls, and cutting-edge systems. Plus, it had a stellar safety record. So how on earth does an aircraft this advanced suffer a total loss just 30 seconds after liftoff? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that official preliminary documents point directly to one of the most prominent theories right now, the fuel control switch theory. Reports suggest the terrifying possibility that the fuel control switch was accidentally bumped or placed into the off position shortly after takeoff. Doing that would immediately shut down the engines, resulting in a total loss of power. And what really gives this theory some serious weight is a historical context note. Back in 2018, the FAA actually issued a special airworthiness information bulletin regarding fuel control lock-pin risks. So this indicates there might have been a potential design or procedural vulnerability that predates this crash entirely. As we look a bit deeper into the AAIB's preliminary report excerpts, we see two other major categories under intense scrutiny. First, potential primary engine failure of the GE-GNX-1B engines, and second, complex human factors. Investigators are deeply analyzing whether an intrinsic mechanical engine failure actually occurred or if pilot error during that incredibly high workload takeoff phase, things like incorrectly retracting the flaps or misconfiguring the takeoff setup, might have played a role. Let's objectively contrast these first two mechanical and procedural theories for a second. On one hand, you have fuel switch misoperation. This is a scenario where human action, perhaps compounded by a tricky locking mechanism design, leads to an accidental engine shutdown. On the exact opposite hand, you have a pure GNX-1B engine failure. We're talking a catastrophic mechanical breakdown, maybe fuel contamination, or a loss of power that is completely independent of the crew's inputs. Currently, the evidence is being so carefully weighed for both, with the flight data and cockpit voice recorders playing a critical role in unraveling the exact sequence of events. So the crucial point is that investigators are really balancing the micro against the macro here. They're weighing human factors, the immense pressure, the training levels, those split-second decisions the crew had to make, against broader system design issues. They are meticulously evaluating Boeing's complex fly-by-wire systems, the software interactions, and the ongoing industry scrutiny regarding Boeing's overall production quality and safety culture. In aviation, it's almost never just one single thing. It is usually a complex chain of events. Section 4. Global Regulatory Response. The aviation industry definitely didn't just sit around waiting for a final report to drop. The reaction to this crash was immediate and sweeping. Literally within 24 hours of the crash, global directives were fired off. India's DGCA ordered enhanced fleet-wide safety inspections for all Air India 787s, checking everything from fuel parameters to electronic engine controls. The US FAA and Europe's ESA issued emergency airworthiness directives requiring immediate moisture integrity checks on specific critical electrical components like the PRBA. Concurrently, Boeing issued a mandatory service bulletin to replace a specific connector with a sealed version to enhance moisture resistance. And this brilliantly illustrates just how fast the global safety net snaps into action. The fact that the FAA, EISA, and DGCA all coordinated their emergency directives so quickly shows how interconnected and proactive global aviation safety protocols have become. They effectively grounded and inspected fleets worldwide to ensure the skies remain absolutely safe while the investigation continues in the background. Section 5. Impact on aviation safety. Let's zoom out a bit and look at the long-term changes we can expect. The final report, whenever it finally arrives, isn't just going to point a finger at a single cause. It's going to issue sweeping mandates across 5 critical areas. We're expecting to see systemic changes in aircraft design, possibly modifying that very fuel switch mechanism. We'll definitely see overhauls in operational procedures and training enhancements to better equip crews for these high workload emergencies. And finally, we will likely see stricter maintenance checklists and much more rigorous regulatory oversight to catch systemic industry vulnerabilities before they ever manifest in the air. These aren't just bureaucratic shifts, guys. These are the core systemic changes that ensure the safety of your next flight. The preliminary report gave us the initial pieces of the puzzle, but the AIB expects the final report to take 12 to 18 months, or maybe even longer, pushing its official release to late 2026 or beyond. Until then, we are left with a pretty profound question. As aviation technology grows increasingly complex, replacing physical mechanical cables with thousands of lines of software and composites, what will this final verdict ultimately reveal about the true safety of modern flight? Will it expose a critical flaw in the human-machine interface, or maybe a lapse in manufacturing? Whatever the answer turns out to be, the legacy of Flight AI171 will undoubtedly rewrite the rules of global aviation. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and stay curious.